Hey everybody, it's Chris Harrison here with the Main Points Podcast. Today we have Nicole Bateman, president of the EDC of Decatur and Macon County. I'm really excited to talk with her. She's been with the EDC, started as marketing manager. She's now the president. But really, I'm really excited to hear about how she views Decatur and really how people of Decatur should view themselves and how other communities view Decatur and really what the identity is of the people here in our community. So welcome on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you. So we've talked about the Main Points Podcast a little bit. This is a little bit different. This is not a calendar of events type of podcast. We really want to celebrate, elevate, and educate everything about Decatur. Certainly the EDC is a huge part of what's driving Decatur right now. So we wanted to take some time to get to know you and kind of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So
great. Sounds good.
So how'd you end up in Decatur? Kind of what brought you here? And then we'll go back from there a little bit too.
Sure. Well, I attended University of Illinois, and right before I graduated, I met a fine young gentleman named Nicole Bateman. He was from Decatur. Okay. And so when we graduated from U of I, we've moved back to Decatur. Or I guess I moved here for the first time. But we had visited, we would come visit in college during summers and breaks. Sure. And I really fell in love with the community, not knowing much about it. I grew up in Quincy, Illinois. So clearly I don't venture too far off of I-72. It must be my comfort zone. So that corridor. So I had driven, on I-72 north of Decatur plenty of times, but knew nothing about it. It's just kind of what you could see from the interstate, right? And at that point, Sun and Fun was still, running. Right. So you saw this cute little golf course, and you look north and you see some of Forsyth, and then you see some, ADM and the, everything going on over there. But that's really all I knew. So I came to Decatur, really fell in love with it, got involved in a lot of different nonprofit organizations, just volunteering, right? Trying to get to meet people in the community, which was a really nice way to get involved very quickly. I found people were happy to have the help and serving on different committees and planning committees and a lot of fundraising events. And then had a series of career opportunities here in the community, eventually, which led to the EDC in the community marketing manager position about 9.5 years ago, to be 10 years in the spring, which is wild to think about. But so started with the EDC as the first community marketing manager to really take charge and rebrand the community for growth and change Decatur's reputation, which was a tall order. Right. Yes. We are going to talk a lot about that. Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that you're the marketing manager then, because that really does kind of fit into where we want to go with this. Good. Okay, perfect.
But it's also interesting that even before you moved here, spending the summers here, what was that like? What did you experience? What did you do? I know you're kind of testing like, okay, who's this guy? I like this guy. Family's there. Do I want to go there? Like, what was that like? I mean, before you were committed, obviously you were very young and still in college.
Yeah. I had the same perceptions of Decatur that most in the central Illinois area did. Candidly, all I knew about it was some gang fight at a football game and Caterpillar strikes. That's all I knew. But that's what was on TV nonstop. And that's before, there was any social media. There were no other real opinions out there. It's just this was what it is. And so I thought, gosh, it's, must be kind of depressed, or must be really rough there. So when we started coming to Decatur, fortunately, his family had a boat. And so we spent a lot of time on the lake in the summers. And then we spent a lot of time downtown. And I thought, I don't quite understand why Decatur gets such a bad rap.
Right.
There's
for
a lot.
For those two things.
And it was interesting as I got in my role later that it was those 2, 3, 4, 5 things that people kept talking about over and over again. And I said, well, you guys, that was like 20 years ago. Why are we still talking about this? But it's like they had nothing else to talk about, and people just struggle to kind of move past that. And so we can take a little bit of a psychoanalysis on that. But I thought of a lot of the same things. It was like, oh, Decatur, do I tell people I'm moving there? Do I, when I moved here, my family in Quincy was battling the same questions from their friends. My parents' friends were, oh, is she safe in Decatur?
Really?
What's going on over there? And I thought, oh, good grief. So my mom's like, give me like 5 talking points, right? So I can share with friends. And so it wasn't dissimilar, but then I really understood why people thought that way. And I thought, okay, well, that's not very fair. Right? There's a lot of good things happening here, but nobody's really talking about it. And then about that same time came this community marketing manager role. And I thought, okay, well, this is perfect because I see all the sides of it, right? Like I was one of those people. I'm here now. We need a champion. There are great things happening. We have to be very strategic, though, on how we talk about it and enact a plan and move forward. So we did, and things have really started to change. There were a lot of factors in that, of course. I'm not, being community marketing manager was not the reason that things have changed, but certainly having a tribe of people and a whole commitment on the part of a community to want to change a narrative has certainly helped benefit our growth today.
I was telling Cassie off air that, and she didn't know this. I said, when I first came to town there, which was 22 years ago, there was a campaign where everybody had little metal trash cans on their desk that said, "Stop trashing Decatur." And like at the time, that was the message.
Right.
That was, I hate to say, how bad it was in the psyche of the people here and beyond here.
Yes.
So certainly we know that it has changed, but when we met with Scott Wrighton on one of the prior episodes too, he talked about the psyche of the community and its members and how, there were just so many. There were a number of things, a few things, but there were jobs, there were plant closures, there were recalls, there were strikes. I mean, there were a lot of things that did beat down the morale and the psyche of the community. So,
definitely.
I remember when the stop trashing little trash cans were sitting there, and I thought, well, kind of relevant at that point it was.
Right.
So it's nice to know we've moved on from there.
Definitely. And I kind of took that same approach. I thought, okay, if you look at Decatur as a person, if you're a person and you think you're doing a good job and things just are taken away from you again and again and again, you start thinking, well, what am I doing wrong here? And then you just completely lose your self-confidence.
Right.
And I feel like that's what happened to the community. And so, but sometimes you almost have to hit that rock bottom before you say, you know what? Nope, no more.
Right.
We are going to take control of this. We're going to come back to our 25-year class reunion looking better than ever.
Right.
It's like just, if you think of it in that mind frame, it's like, okay, there's something to that. And let's make that happen. So that's kind of the approach we took. And I feel like we're getting our swagger back, which is good.
Absolutely. So a little bit of a step back too.
Sure.
Your youth, what did you do? Junior high, high school, what were you involved in? What were you like? What did you like doing? And where did this, personal positive approach come from?
That's a good question. Okay, so as far as like involvement, I started taking piano lessons when I was 8, and then started teaching piano. Right, so I find something that I really enjoy doing, and then like to teach others how to do it. And so I was teaching my little sister's friends. Right, they'd pay me $2 for a half-hour lesson, and so started doing that in 7th grade, and did all the typical kind of high school girl things, babysat, stuff like that. But I was very involved in band. I was not very athletic, so I took more of the club route. But I was very involved in band and FFA, which is great leadership development organization for ag and non-ag kids alike, but very much with the agriculture focus. So I was very involved in FFA in getting my national degree, which is kind of the top degree, that you can get through that organization, and 4-H, and then, just held a lot of leadership and president roles in National Honor Society and all that. So I was always very comfortable. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. I have 36 first cousins, I think, on between my mom and dad's sides. We have a huge family, and I'm one of the oldest on both. So I think, a leadership role comes kind of naturally, being the firstborn and kind of being the oldest of a whole tribe of young children, of which we gathered every Sunday through my childhood. And so
you made homemade ice cream too, didn't you?
We did a little bit. Yeah. But for that many people, it's just more effort than it might be worth. But grew up on a farm, and so didn't have a lot of neighbors, so you had to get real creative. And I think just kind of a lot of creative play, before there were cell phones and cable and all those crazy distractions. But I think a lot of that played into then my work ethic. As a kid, and my grandparents owned a dairy farm, and so we helped on the dairy as well, and kind of did all those farm kid things that I think without that opportunity just to be out there and working and seeing a quick result from your work, right? It is hard sometimes, I think, and I understand in working maybe in roles where you have to understand that what you do every day may pay off someday, but it's not going to pay off today, right? And you just have to keep at it. You have to keep building that ethic and that tenacity to just keep going, and that it will contribute, right? Whether you're building a gigantic machine or you're playing, you're building this widget or you're communicating in this marketing role for something much bigger that has a much bigger effect. I think those are probably a combination of things to maybe why I really enjoy the role I'm in today.
That's great. I mean, that obviously growing up on a farm and knowing that every day you got to work. Whether you're having a bad day or not, whether you feel like it or not, no matter what the weather is,
no matter
the work
those cows
has
need
to be done, and it's leading to a bigger result in the future. And so that's something great. I'm sure as you became an adult and moved into careers and professions, and still to this day you carry. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's important to understand, as much as you can, your role in things, right? So it's like, okay, my role is to do this, and it's contributing to this bigger picture, right? I don't always have to be in charge, but and I don't. Maybe I want to play a role where it's quiet, but it is still celebrated because that role is important. I think that's important for people to kind of realize and to get some more career satisfaction, perhaps, and maybe what they feel is like a mundane role. Well, it's important because if it wasn't, it wouldn't exist.
Right. And I think it's, are you doing the work to get your own celebration and own accolades today versus are you doing the work so that the bigger picture, comes together for everyone, that everyone gets the benefit of and everyone gets to celebrate, and you just played your role in it.
Yes.
And played your part in it.
Yes. Yep. And, living things, doing better than your best and leaving things better than you found it. And I think if we tackle a lot of things in life with that mindset, I think we might surprise ourselves in the things we can achieve.
How important, switching a little bit, how important do you think, not image, but and back to kind of your marketing manager, but the words we use, the vision we give for ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how, and specific to Decatur, how we've moved from stop trashing Decatur to, now there's stickers floating around that Decatur, the heart of it. How important are those words to people?
It's incredibly important. I'll give you an example. So what I would hear sometimes is, why did you move here? Not what brought you here. It's why did you move here?
Why?
And I thought, well, immediately I thought, well, did I make a bad decision? Right? Like I mean, I was pretty confident, but it's like it was that inherent, like, it's really bad here, nobody else will want us, right? Kind of goes back to that loss of self-confidence. Like, well, why would anybody choose to be here? Why would anybody choose me? It's just really sad. But, so it's like the importance of choosing words is incredibly important, especially when you're working and living in a community that is bouncing back. And we have a lot of great things happening. Looking collectively too at the community and all the things that are happening. So you have, you kind of thinking about creating like these centers of gravity, which I'll credit Ron Ingram at Premium with that term because we were talking about this recently, right? But we have the industrial corridor. There are a lot of things that happen in the northeast side of this community that are behind those walls of our major facilities and factories and research and development centers that most of the people living in our community might not be fully aware of or even know what's happening there. They have no idea the types of products that are made that are going, that are global and going throughout the world and impacting lives.
Or who the employees are and who is leading and who is so passionate about things too behind those closed doors in their own world and their own center of gravity. Yes, I did write that down.
Yes, it's
and we will credit Ron for that.
Yes. So it's like thinking about that, but then we think about Lake Decatur, right, which was a hugely underutilized asset that is finally, I think, coming back into the glory it deserves with all of the development that the Park District has been doing around the lake and finally getting people on the lake. And I said that for many years. I said, if people could just get on the lake, they would see Decatur through a different lens.
Yes.
Right. So we need to really continue to build out that asset. And then we have the West End, right? And then you have Mount Zion and Forsyth and Harristown. And so we have all of, and there's more, but it's like we have all of these centers of gravity, but how do we continue to improve those? How do we connect those? Because I think that is our next opportunity for really branding the community. It is, we give ourselves this personality, and I get that question a lot, probably more so now than what I did when we were launching kind of some marketing campaigns around the community, around some very specific topics. But now it's like, okay, things are getting better. How do we brand ourselves? It's like, well, a brand is a feeling. So how do we want people to feel when they come into our community? What are the words we're going to use? How are we going to approach them? What kind of service are we going to give? How do we want our streets to look? How are they going to go from here to here and still maintain that super positive feeling, right? So it's like being very intentional about that. And then, really just making those connections between all of those gravity points so that when people are living here or they're working here or they're visiting here, that they get that same feeling, hopefully, of those of us that are living here and working towards that every day.
Mm-hmm. What should the community members feel? How should they feel about themselves? Whether it be the workers, whether it be the factory workers, restaurant workers, service workers even. I mean, I feel like sometimes that's kind of that missing piece. And it used to be, people come visit from out of town, they go to a restaurant, hey, server, what is it like here? You're going to get one of two reactions. And I've told this story on here before that recently I had someone that stayed for 3 days. And I said, how was it? And how was the service there? And they go, it was fantastic. The people love being here. And I thought, that's a shift, because it wasn't always that way. And I know it's not always that way anymore, or all the time. But so, I mean, how do you want people to feel as being residents of this community?
I think I want people to be satisfied. And that level of satisfaction probably varies for different people, right? But if you are satisfied at home, you're satisfied with your job, you're satisfied with your community, there's a lot of good then that you're going to be able to do for others. And so finding a way to kind of align those so that they feel good about the community and then they're helpful, is I think where I really want people to be. Again, though, realizing like what satisfies one person may not be satisfactory to another. I get that. And that's okay. That's fine. We should all have different levels of expectations.
Right.
But I do think that, once you're, I generally notice that people who are generally satisfied are much more logical and excited about the things that are happening around them. Those that somewhere inside are not satisfied with themselves or something going on in their lives, nothing else matters and everything else is crappy.
There's some struggle and they feel they're in that fight still to whether it be business or personal or community, the fight to get ahead. Whereas somebody that feels a level of satisfaction or peace then becomes appreciative and more giving and wants to help someone else see and feel that way too.
And then we can lift, you can lift up the person next to you that really needs that because you've achieved that to some extent for yourself, and then there's some people that will never be satisfied.
Right, there's always those
as well. There
are always those too. So how do you, from the EDC perspective, back to even when you were the marketing manager and now as president, how do you go about establishing a vision and then kind of putting those actions into place to make that vision happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think recognizing what I've realized is that things are always changing and evolving, right? I mean, that it is constant, and it's actually changing more rapidly now than what it was, I would say, 10 years ago, right? And throw in a pandemic in the middle of that, and a lot of things have changed. So setting out a vision, I think, needs to be time bound, right? Like how long do you think it's going to take for this vision to really take hold? Because if we're talking like a 20, 30, 40-year vision, well, that has a different time frame and a different to-do list and tackle list than something that could be done in a year, right? But I think it's, I say this a lot, and sometimes like I do a lot of visioning, which I know that sounds funny, but I don't have a better word for it. Like if I'm like kind of staring off into space, or I'm like looking at something, my husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm visioning, whether that's like, okay, what are we going to do over here in this space in our yard? Or what are we going to do? So like, I love so our offices fortunately have a really beautiful view of the city, but it really helps with visioning, because it's like, okay, what's going on over here, and why isn't that working, or how can we be helpful and improve that area, right? Whether that be, pick a topic, right? Like how can we impact through the work we do? We have to be very careful that we don't stretch ourselves too thin, though, because that's what I was finding when I was community marketing manager, because really you could justify being involved in everything, because at that point there was ownership on some things, not ownership on a lot of things. Now we have ownership on a lot of things, not the EDC, but a lot of people have stepped up to take ownership on different projects and initiatives throughout the community, which I'm super grateful for. But I think, everybody may have different visions, but at some point having kind of a central vision, whether it's, we're talking about a street corridor revitalization, neighborhood revitalizations, economic development, business attraction, developing ecosystems, workforce, whatever that may be, just making sure that players in the room for that ecosystem that you're creating have a similar vision will be important to then determining who does what, when, how you get that done, and moving that forward.
And I would think the different organizations that have ownership of different segments, everybody has their own vision.
Yes.
For here we want this, and this different organization has their own vision or hopes or why. But I think still them knowing the overall community vision is a broader approach. And then the goal is, how do we get everybody to kind of feed into that big picture? Again, back to you helping milk the cow helped build a barn, how many years from now too. So everybody's doing their small piece.
Yep. And having that collective and constant communication, really. And that's what I have found, is that things were disconnected for a really long time. So you had this group over here was doing this, and they weren't talking to this person over here, and they had no idea that this person in this group even existed. Right. And I think we can just be more effective when we collaborate to some extent, or at least be aware of each other's plans. So I think that's getting significantly better. I think silos are really starting to, I don't say come down, because I think some things can still be a little siloed, but I think when you communicate the results that we're going to get and the collective impact that thing has, right? Whatever the ecosystem is that it's working in, it's going to be much greater if we're all at least talking and collaborating and not duplicating efforts.
Right.
Especially, we're seeing these demands from, when we talk about funding, like from the state or federal government. They want to know your record of collaboration, and they want to see so many partners at the table. I think they are done largely just giving money to one group and saying, okay, go do it. It's like, no, how are you collaborating, and what's your record of success?
Right.
And so we just wrote for 2 big grants, and that was a big, a very prominent part of it, is who else is at the table and what are they putting in? Because we realized like that leverage is really important. And so, just, having kind of a central core, even though everybody might be effective at doing different things, just having a central core to make sure that coordination and that communication is super critical to achieving whatever vision it might be.
Yes. And I think the EDC as it exists now, to be a little tactical here, but like with the board members you have are strategically placed to where you want to make sure the right people are at the table.
Yes.
And everybody's hearing the same conversation, or if one person asks a question, the others go, I need that answer too, or I have that same issue. And talking with some of your board members, they go, the issues I'm facing, others are facing too. So that I think
Definitely.
That's your role as president of the EDC is important of being a sounding board for those board members and those different entities.
Yep, definitely. That's a big part of it. And then also just being an active listener, so we can know what's going on. There's a lot of things that we know that could happen or might happen that others don't know because they can't know, but that's okay. It's like somebody should know so that then they can connect the dots. Because then when you can start connecting the dots, that's when things start to happen. So I do that all day long, right? So you've got the visioning piece, but then you also have the active listening where then you can start to connect the dots and kind of bring that vision to life.
So how do you envision Decatur? I mean, when you sit in your office and look out, what do you see? I mean, I know you see some things happening or something that's in the works that we don't know about, and you can visualize that there. What do you see down the road?
Yeah, so it's filling it in, right? So another, and I can't remember if it was Kat Smaller or Steph Zimmerman that used this quote, but they said it's like Swiss cheese. So in Decatur, you have these pockets, right? It's like Swiss cheese. So, but it's like, how do you connect the cheese to fill it in, right? Wow. So I know. Again, it's that active listening, but you see it, right? You see it. So it's like, so then how do we take what's happening over here and connect it and fill it in with the appropriate businesses, right? Whether that be retail or commercial or industrial, or the appropriate housing, and overlay that plan with, let's say, like the Bike Decatur plan, and we do this, and how do you... So it's like constantly just thinking about, okay, what makes sense to go in this location? You know, we're not going to put a factory in downtown Decatur. That doesn't make sense, right? Where does it make sense for these types of businesses to go? And I think we've proven that when you put a real focus on, we'll just say like the industrial corridor, right? And be very intentional about the type of businesses that we want to attract and plan in that area. We need to really be thinking as a community. And I think this is, now that I feel like we're on solid ground again, we can really start to grow significantly from here, and thinking about being very intentional about, okay, well, why, it has long been my vision to have homes between downtown and the West End along Main Street and Wood Street. Like, why are we not developing that entire area? That should be walkable. That should be, right? Like, I mean, yes. And then from downtown to Lake Decatur. I mean, there are a lot of challenges and intentional things that we need to do to make that happen, but we can make it happen. And that's what I see. That's how I see Decatur, right? That's how I vision it moving forward, is just being really intentional about placing businesses, placing homes, placing lifestyles around so that it all works together in concert. I feel like, to me, and I have said this for many years, and so we just need to, I think, make it happen. But to me, there is nothing worse than seeing a startup, an entrepreneur who has put their life savings into ABC store, whatever that might be, but it's misplaced. Like we know they're not going to get enough foot traffic, or they're not going to get whatever. Like, let's have a plan with some incentives to say, you know what, we need a I'm just saying a coffee shop, because everybody thinks about coffee, right? So like, we need a coffee shop in this neighborhood. Where would it be well placed with the best chance of it to succeed? How do we incentivize, and how do we grow our local entrepreneurship ecosystem as such that somebody local can do that? Like, it's great to have the national brands come in. That's good. But sure. But that comes after retail follows households. So we have to have more people making more money to get those bigger retail things here. It's starting to happen, which is exciting. But there are still a lot of people that want to own their own business, right? They want to do that. And so how do we grow that? But I think just letting it happen haphazardly is not just for that person or for our community.
Right.
We could both win if it just was intentional.
Because that entrepreneur, you know, as much as they know about their craft, or, you know, whether it be coffee or sandwich or art or whatever, they know that. They don't know the things that you may know about traffic patterns or spending patterns and spending habits and times of day studies. Yeah. And so I agree. I think that is something that would be very beneficial, because, you know, entrepreneurship is what really builds the fabric of a community. It builds the soul and the heart of a community. Are who are the businesses, you know, because they're the ones that are putting themselves on the line to create an attraction, a service, a product. And that's what people remember. They don't remember, you know, oh, we got Starbucks and it was wonderful. No. They remember that pour over coffee we had at the river downtown and how we felt then.
And that's the community's brand, right? That's how that feeling of being in that community feels, right? If you go to a community with a very vibrant local entrepreneurship ecosystem, you can tell because there's a lot of locally owned businesses that are doing well.
Yep.
Like I want more of that. Mm-hmm. That's what I vision for the community. We are rocking and rolling on the industrial side and the big companies and the big, right? Like we're doing that. We're going to continue to do that. But I feel like we're to the point as a community now where we are getting our confidence back. People are really looking at Decatur in a different way regionally because we stood up for a number of years and said, no, that's not true. Stop saying that.
Stop. Yep.
And now it's like, oh, wow. Okay, well, what's going on over there, right? We've had some really big wins. So It's like, all right, so let's build on that. Let's make sure that everybody that wants to participate in the success and this exciting new era for our community can do that and they can succeed doing that.
Yes. And it's a better environment for them to succeed now because we've got the big wins. We've got the job growth that's happening. We've got, people moving to town, people retiring to town. People are just moving here because they enjoy being here. How do we continue to foster that and nurture the environment for those entrepreneurs to be here?
Yes, because it doesn't just happen on its own. It has to be fostered. It has to be nurtured.
And it's, it's I don't want to say it takes perfection, but you can make a small mistake in a business and it can be costly.
Yep.
Very costly.
Definitely.
I think, the kind of the last tangent we were on there of how it, us standing up and saying, no, not anymore. That goes back to that psyche from the 80s and 90s, and how we've moved on from that.
Yep.
And now I think the psyche of Decatur and the people of Decatur and even the new people of Decatur that are moving here is really one more of hope and optimism and excitement for the future of what it could be. And when you have people that have hope and are visioning and are saying, okay, how we really sow the seeds for success, that's where people excel and grow and build and continue visioning.
And that's where they invest, right? Whether that's they're investing in a business themselves or they're just patronizing the businesses that we have because at the end of the day, they're satisfied.
Right.
And they're happy and they're excited to be here.
Yep. Yeah. Because it's a great place to be.
Agreed. I love it.
Good. Very good. Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. That was a great conversation with Nicole. I really loved the story about how when she was a child and she worked on the dairy farm with her family and understanding that the work you do today is really just a small step to helping a big accomplishment happen or a big project succeed. And really that's what she does today. And I think that's what we all do in this community. We all play a small part towards a huge victory. So thanks for tuning in.